You guys, Erin here. I am back with another moon update for you. And what I'm going to be talking about today is this super optimistic full moon we've got coming up here on Wednesday, June 11th. The full moon peaks at 12:43 a.m. Pacific time, and this takes place in the sign of Sagittarius, hence the optimism of this full moon. It is truly a lovely lineup with this full moon. It's referred to as the strawberry moon, and it's because, at least for most of us in the world, this is a time of year when there's strawberries growing. And I just happened to find a wild strawberry patch in the forest, like about 20 feet away from my house. And they're teeny tiny strawberries, but they're so sweet and they're so delicious. I've been nibbling on them, but it's also been fun to watch the squirrels come down and eat the strawberries. And it just made me smile thinking about this strawberry full moon we've got coming up here. When you think about, a strawberry makes people feel good. It's just an optimistic, fun kind of fruit to eat. And that's very much like the sign of Sagittarius, okay? So what I'm going to do in this recording is first I'm going to break down the sign of Sagittarius for you, because this is the peak of a growth cycle that began approximately 6 months ago. And we had a new moon in the sign of Sagittarius. Over these 6 months, we've all been experiencing these astrological forces that give us an opportunity for growth that's related to the sign of Sagittarius. And this is a time to be honoring that growth. But it's also a time, if there's any of this Sagittarius energy that just may not be serving you, this would be a time to let some of that go. It's like, as the moon is getting closer and closer and closer to being full, she peaks at 12:43 a.m. Pacific time on Wednesday, June 11th. But by 12:44 a.m. Pacific time, the moon is starting to wane. So that's when we could stay in the natural flow of things with setting the intention to let go of some of the Sagittarius energy that, again, is just not serving us. Another thing that full moons can do is they can shine light on something that you hadn't realized before, okay? And a lot of this happens if you've got something in your natal chart that's near 20 degrees Sagittarius, or maybe trining that near 20 degrees Aries or Leo, or maybe opposing that near 20 degrees Gemini, maybe squaring it near 20 degrees Pisces or Virgo. A lot of times what can happen is, again, it's like an epiphany of sorts. And a lot of times that epiphany is related to the energy of the zodiac sign that the full moon takes place in. But also, if you're somewhat familiar with your natal chart, or if you've had a reading with me, you can go back and review the video recording to see which house in your natal chart this is specifically manifesting for you, because that house is like a theme of your life. And anytime I've had an epiphany with a full moon, it doesn't necessarily happen at the moment of the full moon. It's usually in days surrounding the full moon. A lot of times I see it relating to the energy of the house that the full moon is taking place in my own natal chart. If that's too much for you to comprehend, if you're new to this stuff, don't worry about it. Just follow along as best as you can. But that's the energy of a full moon. So first we're going to break down the sign of Sagittarius for you, so you know what you're working with here. Then I'm going to pull up the chart and we're going to go through these astrological forces that we are receiving. I mean, really, the whole month of June and July, there's a lot of shifts going on, a lot of big changes going on. We get Jupiter in the sign of Cancer, really, really exciting stuff. So I'm going to have fun going through the chart. Not only that, but really for anybody, no matter how this is hitting your chart, this is an incredible time to be making a change in your life. If there's something that you have been going, gosh, I really need to make this change in any area of your life, this is an incredible time to do it, because we've got something called a grand mutable square going on. Okay, so I'll break that down for you in the chart. And then I'm also going to be talking about certain parts of the body that are ruled by the sign of Sagittarius, because these parts of our body become sensitized anytime anything up in the sky is transiting through the sign of Sagittarius. And I'm just going to put this out there right now in case you don't make it to that point of the recording. Really, the sign of Sagittarius, that's where the moon will be. The sign of Gemini is where the sun will be. Then we've got the north node going through the sign of Pisces and the south node going through the sign of Virgo. That's a lot of energy that's hitting the nervous system. Okay, all of those signs have a big influence on the nervous system. So I will also be mentioning some potential herbal remedies to help support these parts of our body during this kind of transit. There are other parts of the body that the sign of Sagittarius rules. We'll go into that. Okay, and also, as usual, I'll mention some gemstones that resonate well with the sign of Sagittarius. I always leave a full extensive list of stones that resonate well with the sign the moon is transiting through in the description below. As many of you know, every single full moon for the last 9 years, I've been pulling in my journal. I write down the growth that I'm honoring that growth related to the sign. I write down what I want to let go of. I apply it to the area of my own natal chart that it's manifesting through. And then I like to take a few gemstones that resonate well with the astrological forces we're receiving and put them on top of my journal. Please do not feel discouraged or you're missing out on something if you don't have any of these gemstones. A new moon is always a great time to be manifesting more gemstones into our life. Okay, so let's get into this. The sign of Sagittarius, this is what we call mutable fire. Okay, mutable means it's adaptable. All of the mutable signs come through when we're entering into, like just before we enter into a new season. Okay, the sun right now is in the sign of Gemini. Gemini is mutable. We're just about to head into summertime. The mutable signs are the last zodiac sign before we enter into a new season. Okay, now with that said, what they do is they mutate energy. People who have a lot of mutable signs in their natal chart, they're very mutable people. They're adaptable people. It's like there's constant change going on in their life, and they tend to do well with it. They tend to hang out with all different types of people and so on and so forth. Now, in the element of fire, it's very much about energy. Okay, this is like the sign of wildfire. It's the sign that it's fascinated by everything. I want to go this way. I want to go check out what's going on over there. I want to go check out what's going on over here. It's a sign that it's like an energy that it's not stabilized at all, but it's a fun energy. Sign of Sagittarius tends to be silly. Okay, it tends to doesn't mean everybody who's Sagittarius or Sagittarius rising is going to be silly, but a lot of them are, because it's an energy that's coming out with this, flexibility. Okay, now also the sign of Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter is what we describe as the great benefic. Okay, Jupiter, if you could picture Jupiter as a human and be like a professor at a great university, a university that just teaches the best information ever. And this professor is like the most popular professor on the campus. He teaches wisdom. He teaches things of abundance. He takes his students traveling across the seas to see the way other cultures live, brings abundance to the university. That is very much a Jupiterian influence. Jupiter is the great expander. Okay, I picture this professor as like a stout person with a big head sort of thing. That's very Jupiter energy. That's why the sign of Sagittarius, in part, why the sign of Sagittarius is this sign of optimism and wisdom. It's also very faith-based. Okay, it's in traditional astrology, the sign of Sagittarius and Jupiter are both associated with faith or religion, not by any means one particular kind of religion, but more the faith that comes with religion, with optimism. Like if you can picture people, practicing their faith, but they're dancing and they're singing, they're having a good time with it. That's very Sagittarius energy. Okay, now the sign of Sagittarius is represented by the archer that's always out on an adventure. Okay, the archer it's the sign that can foresee. In fact, the motto for the sign of Sagittarius is I see. This is a sign that's pretty intuitive because the adventurer and the archer need to be able to foresee. Okay, but they're doing it with fun. They're doing it with optimism. They're doing it with faith. Okay, another thing that I will notice with the sign of Sagittarius, I see this a lot with Sagittarius risings and Sagittarius sun, is people that will just they're honest. They're sometimes they don't mean to be, but sometimes they can say stuff that might come off as rude to other people because they're blunt. They just kind of blurt things out, that sort of thing. But it's overall a wonderful, optimistic, faith-based, adventurous, wise energy. Okay, so that's the energy that we're receiving for this full moon. How have you grown in these ways? In my opinion, I feel like most people, especially, anybody who's following my kind of, information, has faith. Okay. And I just feel like that's something that is so incredibly important, especially in the times that we are living in. I don't think we can 100% rely on faith, but I do think, it's like where focus goes, energy flows. And that's very much about having faith. Maybe you've been out on adventures. Maybe you finally found yourself, with trying to break free from all the restrictions in the world. I'm just going out on this adventure. for a little while there, a couple of years, I was really, really tight friends. She ended up moving away, but I was really tight friends with a lady she was a Sagittarius. She had a total Sagittarius stellium. I think she was Sagittarius sun rising. I think her Mercury, Mars, everything was in Sagittarius. And we would take our shoes off. We would go out into the forest barefoot, probably sometimes put ourselves in maybe a little bit of a dangerous position because we had no idea what we were doing. We were just out in the forest, roaming around, finding an adventure and having faith and being able to foresee which direction we should go, that sort of thing. We didn't have a map or anything like that, but it was super fun. And so how have you grown in those kinds of ways? Maybe you've just overall found more optimism in your life. This is a time to honor those things. And as far as, setting the intentions to let some of this go, I will say this, the sign of Sagittarius can have this tendency to set a goal. Like it has the sign of Sagittarius being represented by the archer can definitely have high aims. Like I am going after that goal. I'm going after it and it's a high aim, but I'm going to do it. But then get off track. Because it is wildfire. It's like, oh, wait, no, I want to go this way instead. Oh, no, I want to go this way instead. And so that's one thing that we can, take into consideration. If you've been a little too mutable in your life, this might be a time to let some of that go. In fact, it's a great time to let some of that go. If you've had a hard time, which I know a lot of people would do this, say, I want to start my own business and I'm going to do it this way. And they start going after it. But then all of a sudden they get sidetracked with something and they end up, kind of falling off track. Okay. This lineup for this full moon is a fantastic time to make that change, especially with the North node going through Pisces and the South node going through the sign of Virgo. Okay, so overall, have you grown these ways? Is there anything you want to let go of that's related to this zodiac sign? Now, let's go ahead and pull up the chart here. If you are new here, I work with geocentric Western astrology. So with that said, what we're looking at is a snapshot of what we call the tropical zodiac at the time of this full moon. Now, with geocentric, that means we put Earth right here in the middle of this thing. These right here are the symbols for the planets and the celestial bodies. Like here's Venus, here's Uranus, here's the Sun, here's Jupiter. When we go in the wheel just a little ways, these are the symbols for the zodiac signs. So all those planets and celestial bodies would be beaming through onto Earth at the time of this full moon. So let's start here. And by the way, in case you take the time to look up this full moon in your location, the chart might look slightly different. For everybody, here's the moon. The moon's going to be at 20 degrees Sagittarius and 39 minutes. The sun is going to be at 20 degrees, 39 minutes Gemini. Okay, all the planets and celestial bodies will be at the same degree. But here's, in my location, the sun would be in the 4th house. If you're over in New York or something, the sun could be over here. If you're in the UK, the sun could be over here. So take that into consideration if you're trying to learn this stuff for yourself. Okay, so let's start here with the moon. The moon, again, 20 degrees, 39 minutes Sagittarius. Okay, so at 20 degrees, 39 minutes, this does put us in something called the third decan of this Sagittarius energy. So there's actually a little bit of a twist of Leo energy as well, which that little twist of Leo energy, Leo's fix, can help to stabilize some of this wildfire. Okay, but here's the sun at 20 degrees, 39 minutes Gemini. That's what happens every single time we have a full moon. The sun and the moon are exactly opposite each other. That's in part why full moons are so incredibly powerful. The two brightest lights in the sky are facing each other. It's like they are embracing their own growth or they're embracing the collective's growth. Okay. Now, and by the way, happy solar return season to all you Geminis out there. We've got, 10 more days after this full moon. Well, 9.5 more days of springtime. And then we've got the summer solstice and the sun will be in the sign of Cancer. And that's super exciting, especially since Jupiter is in Cancer now. Okay, now, I think I probably want to get right into this grand square. When we talk about a grand square, we're talking about this square that's going right through the middle of the chart. Okay, that just doesn't happen very often, especially with a full moon. And here's the moon in Sag, here's the sun in Gemini, here's the south node in Virgo, and here's the north node in Pisces. Again, those are all mutable signs. A square is one of these red lines. It's a 90-degree angle. And what is one square, just here's the south node going up to the moon, one square can kind of create a tension, like an internal tension, but it's also a force. It forces things to happen. When somebody's born in their natal chart with a grand square in the middle, like right in the middle of their chart, a lot of times they can have a life where there is a lot of tension, there's blockages, and they have to learn to build their way out. There's a force that says, you got to get out of this. You've got to build your way out of this. Okay. And with them being in these changeable zodiac signs, with that force, it's like, here's the sun beaming a force over to the north node. Here's the moon beaming a force over to the north node. And then here's the sun beaming a force over to the south node, and the moon beaming a force over to the south node. These nodes, in case you're super new here, it's like the north node is what pumps energy in. Like the transiting north node is like a pump that works through magnetism, and it's pumping this Pisces energy in. Versus over here, the south node is like the drain point that's taking that energy away. And that's what I'm talking about, especially if you've got anything in your natal chart. I'm going to go with between 19 and 24 degrees, Sagittarius, Gemini, Pisces, or Virgo. This is an exceptionally powerful time to make a change. When I say anything, I mean, of course, it's going to depend on what it is. But if it's something very prominent, like your sun or your moon or your rising sign, even if it's Mercury or Mars or Jupiter or something like that, this is sending a force to make the change, and also take into consideration what house that thing is in your natal chart, because that'll show you the theme, the area of your life that the change should be made through. Okay, now let's see here. Let's go into the ruler of this full moon. So here's Jupiter, the great benefic, the ruler of this full moon, who just entered into the sign of Cancer. This is super exciting because this is where Jupiter exalts. This is Jupiter. He works with his greatest strength in the sign of Cancer. Jupiter gets to be extra charitable in the sign of Cancer. Jupiter is going to be in the sign of Cancer for a full year. If you've got some strong Cancerian energy in your natal chart, you might experience some abundance of sorts. Again, it depends on what house is coming through, how your Jupiter's aspected, but for the most part, you might be receiving some kind of abundance over the next year. And with that said, I feel like Jupiter's super, super happy here. And again, what's going to happen, I'm kind of jumping the gun here, but on June 20th, the sun will enter into the sign of Cancer. And then a few days after that, the sun and Jupiter will be conjunct in the sign of Cancer. What a lovely way to start summertime. I'm super excited about that. But also, I'm going to mention this as I look to see in your chart, if you've got anything in the early degrees of the sign of Cancer, say between 0 and 5 degrees Cancer, Jupiter's approaching that thing. That's super exciting. But also, this right here is Mercury, which Mercury is already past Jupiter at the time of this full moon. What Mercury, in short, rules over is our data, like our data being processed, information going into our consciousness, information being brought back out for us to communicate. And when Jupiter is next to Mercury, it's almost like expanding that, information, the data processing, expanding it, kind of making it a bigger deal. But it is in the sign of Cancer, which Cancer is a very sensitive sign. Cancer is the nurturer of the zodiac. That's in part why Jupiter exalts there. Jupiter gets to be extra charitable. The sign of Cancer is almost like the mother of the zodiac. Okay. But you might be feeling a little bit extra, like you need to nurture people. Might even be something along the lines of you feel like you need to protect yourself or your loved ones. The sign of Cancer is very much about protection. Okay. So there's that. Now, I think next up we'll talk about Venus. So Venus is another benefic. Okay. This is so great. We've got both the benefics, Jupiter and Venus. They're the most beneficial of all the influences we receive. And they're both in dignity. Okay. Jupiter again is exalted in the sign of Cancer. Venus here had just moved into the sign of Taurus. That's her own home. She works comfortably there. She's extra sensual there. She's extra lovely there. She's extra poetic there. In fact, if you've got anything near 5 degrees Taurus, there might be something lovely coming into your life. Maybe, something that has to do with beauty, or maybe even art, or a female coming into your life, or just a relationship overall. You might be feeling a little extra sensual, that sort of thing. I certainly love Venus in Taurus. Now, let's see here. Let's talk about Mars in Leo. So Mars finally finishing up in the sign of Leo. Don't get me wrong. I love Mars in Leo. That's just me. Not everybody does. Everybody I know who has their Mars in Leo they can just get through life. It's because Mars is what rules over it's like anything that triggers our our adrenals or our muscles, anything that requires us to take action is a Mars influence, okay? The sign of Leo is the sign of courage, and it's like the leader, the lion, the king or queen of the jungle kind of energy. And so Mars is really fired up in the sign of Leo. And this is actually a beautiful trine, an approaching trine hours after this full moon. The moon, she's going to move along. She's already making a trine with Mars, but hours after this full moon, she'll make an exact trine with Mars, which in fact, we're talking about this full moon really does create an influence for making a change here. And again, the moon being in the last decan of the sign of Sagittarius it's kind of blended in with the sign of Leo to help stabilize things. But a trine going over to Mars and Leo not only can help us take action with making those changes, but can also help to hold it there. Leo's a fixed sign. Okay, so I hope that made sense. Now we've also got Chiron over here in the sign of Aries. So Chiron, the wounded healer, has a lot to do with wounds from early childhood. We all have them to a certain degree. Clearly, some people's are more traumatic than others, but they're wounds from early childhood. And a lot of those can be very strongly associated with Chiron, but ultimately Chiron wants us to heal from those wounds. And going to the sign of Aries, Aries is the warrior. Aries is the pioneer. Aries is the sign of self. So it's like, let's heal those things ourselves. And this is a perfect trine going over to Mars. In fact, we've got a grand trine. Look at that. We've got a grand trine and a grand square. This triangle going, it's like, here's the moon. The moon's making an approaching exact trine. Trine basically means those things are harmonizing together. They're getting along. It's a lovely combination. Okay. Especially to have a grand square and the grand trine, because the grand square forces things to happen. But the trine helps to mellow things out, helps things to flow a little harmoniously. And again, that could very much have to do with healing those wounds from early childhood. Okay, now the next thing I want to talk about is, here is Saturn. This is just a trip here. Saturn has entered Aries and will only be there, I think, until either September or October. Then it's going to retrograde back into Pisces until February of next year. But Saturn, it's like he's peeking his head. Neptune as well. We're going to talk about that in a minute here. It's almost like Saturn is peeking his head into the sign of Aries to say, hey, I'm checking up on you, but I got to go. I'll be back later. Like he's popping his head in there until later on this year. Again, it's either September or October that Saturn peeks his head into the sign of Aries. Then he goes back into the sign of Pisces. And then February next year, he's back in the sign of Aries for another 2 years. Okay, so Saturn, no fun. Saturn is Mr. Rigid. Saturn is a very strict energy, creates blockages, makes us learn patience. Okay. And the sign of Aries is not a sign of patience at all. Sign of Aries is, again, it's the pioneer. Aries is the warrior. Aries is the sign that goes and does things without thinking about repercussions. Okay. And so Saturn's kind of creating a blockage there with that, the fired up Aries energy. But we've also got Neptune here, which Neptune is the bringer of dreams and mysticism and delusions and confusion. Don't get me wrong, Neptune's lovely. Neptune can have a lot to do with like altered states of consciousness and, things that make you feel, what's the word I'm looking for here? Almost like an opium kind of high, that sort of thing we would get from Neptune. But in Aries, it's like Aries doesn't like that. Aries doesn't want, the fogginess. Again, Aries wants to go. And again, Neptune also is only in the sign of Aries for a few months, and then it's going to retrograde back into Pisces. And then finally next year, I believe that's also in March, Neptune is in the sign of Aries for the next 14 years. But the combination of these things, let's say you're trying to pioneer something. You're trying to start something. You're trying to self-start something, especially if you've got something in the early degrees of Aries in your natal chart. Again, it would kind of depend on what it is. But if you've been trying to start something in your life, and there's some sort of a blockage there. There's something that's Saturn going, well, wait a minute. We got to check all of our T's are crossed and I's are dotted sort of thing. Or creating something that's almost like a restriction from what you're trying to start. And then Neptune there kind of making it a little confusing at the same time. Like the combination of these, I do think that Saturn conjunct Neptune is kind of trying to teach us some patience. And I will say this as well. I do think that Saturn and Neptune conjunct in the sign of Aries could potentially have something to do with us going into like another war. I kind of feel like it's going to be more of a like spiritual warfare. In my opinion, we've been in a spiritual warfare for thousands of years, but I almost feel like it's there's something going on there, and it very well, now that I think about it, I didn't even think about this till right now, very well could have to do with technology and, you know, AI kind of taking over everything, robots, that sort of thing. The reason I say that doesn't necessarily have something directly to do with Neptune and Saturn in Aries, but over here we've got Uranus in the sign of Taurus, finishing up in the sign of Taurus. Okay. In fact, I think it's July 7th. Uranus will move into the sign of Gemini, but that's another one that will only be there for a few months. Then he's going to retrograde back on the sign of Taurus. And then finally 2026, I think it's in April of 2026, Uranus will be in the sign of Gemini for the next 7 years. So with that said, Uranus is finishing up in the sign of Taurus. Uranus has a massive influence on things like technology. Okay. Uranus creates crazy change, abrupt, radical changes to whatever, like the energy of the sign that he's going through. The sign of Taurus is it's like the earth of the earth signs. It has everything to do with our earthly, things that grow from the earth, money, finances, things that are our material possessions, your furniture, your clothes, your whatever it is. That's very Taurus energy. And Uranus here is creating this very abrupt and radical change to those very earthly things. And up here, we've got Pluto in Aquarius. I'm going to tie this all together here in a minute. Pluto is the ruler of the underworld. Okay. Pluto, if you can imagine yourself going through like the darkest part of your life, and we've all had to go through that at some point in your life. If you haven't, then more than likely you will at some point in your life. We're going through just like what feels so dark and underworld-ish. And then you climb yourself out of that. You rise above that. Then you're empowered by that whole situation. You go through, I'm just going to say, you go through hell and then you rise back up and you're fully empowered through that transformational process. That is what Pluto influences. Pluto is the planet of power. Okay. And Pluto is transiting through the sign of Aquarius for the next 19 years. Aquarius is the sign of radical technological changes. Also is the sign of humanity. Okay. So I'm talking about, this spiritual warfare that could be coming through, some system of technology, because, and this is really wild, there's that Saturn and Neptune, they're making a sextile with Pluto and making a sextile with Uranus. And that there's certain points, this is going to go on for about a year, little over a year. It's a conversation that's going on between Uranus and Pluto, because they're also trining each other. Okay. And then there's Saturn and Neptune. I'm trying so hard to decide right now if I should really go deep into this. I think what I'm about to go through is going to be a lot of information to process if you've never heard any of this before, but just follow along as best as you can. Okay. In mythology, Greek mythology, here's Uranus, which is basically grandfather. Okay. And grandfather was a tyrant, but grandfather was taken over by his son Saturn here. Okay, that was Kronos. Kronos, to get detailed here, sliced off Uranus's testicles, his grandfather's testicles, and that creates some tension, clearly, right? And then Saturn, Kronos, became the tyrant. Okay, the one that created all these restrictions and harshness. Saturn had children. His first child was Neptune here, Poseidon. Okay, as soon as Poseidon or Neptune was born, Kronos, Saturn, swallowed him, ate his own child. And then next up was Pluto, which is Hades, swallowed that child. By the time this other child came out, Zeus is Jupiter, Saturn's wife, or Kronos' wife, Rhea. She hid the baby because she was like, no, I don't want you to eat this one. And so she hid Zeus or Jupiter. And then she tricked him. He swallowed a stone instead. There's a lot of little details to this. I'm just getting to the brunt of it. Jupiter or Zeus eventually, like he was raised secretly and then was raised to be the hero. Okay. Jupiter or Zeus ended up like kind of taking over with his brothers. He tricked his father, Kronos, Saturn, into regurgitating Pluto and Neptune, or Hades and Poseidon, regurgitated them. Then the three brothers kind of took over together. Now that pissed Saturn off, Kronos off to, the nth degree. Now, if you could imagine the masculine tension that is going on, imagine having like a family dinner where there's grandfather there who's super abrupt and radical, and he's pissed off at his son because his son basically killed him. But they're still at the dinner table together. This is a kind of a silly analogy, but just if you could think about this, then there's the son, Kronos, who is a total tyrant and restricts everybody from doing what they want to do. And then we've got Neptune here, which can be aggressive. Neptune is not aggressive like Pluto is. Pluto is just straight up aggressive, ruler of the underworld. Neptune's aggressive, making things confusing, okay, or delusional. Neptune's there passing drugs out to everybody at the table. And there's a lot of tension going on there. And all of these guys are having conversations together. That's why I'm coming up with the analogy of them all sitting at the dinner table together. Interestingly, I do think he's the king here because he's exalted, and especially at 0 degrees Cancer. That's the first, he's like opening the floodgates of that energy. And so I do think Jupiter, he's in dignity, he's stoked. And Jupiter's again, the great benefic. And also Venus over here is also, she's dignified in the sign of Taurus. Venus came from when Saturn cut off Uranus's testicles, that's where Venus came from. That's where she kind of came from the sea. And so Venus is also here. She's also playing a role in this conversation. Venus is also at the table. She's trying to calm everybody down. But she's having a little bit of an argument with Pluto over here because of the square that's going on. I think I better leave that there. I hope you guys get the idea as to what I'm going through here. It's like there's chaos. And you know what I keep thinking about is this thing that's going on, and I don't know enough about it to really go into any kind of detail, but I have seen enough to understand that, at least from my opinion, the whole darn thing is just theater. But, all of a sudden Elon Musk and Donald Trump are, battling, that sort of thing. I'm seeing that, but it's ready to create a change, a karmic change for all of us, whether if it's real or complete theater. Okay, so there's that. Let's see. Did I cover everything I wanted to here? I think I did. I think I'm going to leave that there. Let's talk about body parts. Okay, so the sign of Sagittarius rules the hips, the thighs, and the femur. Also has a very big influence on the sciatic nerve. A lot of people who've got strong Sagittarius energy in their chart, especially if it's kind of aspected in a harsh way, deal with sciatic nerve issues. And this full moon very well could trigger that. And I'm telling you, this is hearing this from somebody who had major sciatic nerve issues a long time ago, somewhere around 20 years ago. I was like in my mid to late 20s. I can't remember exactly when it was, but I really did a number on my back. And I mean, it was to the point where I had 2 doctors telling me that I should get back surgery. And I'm so glad I didn't, and I healed it naturally. But regardless, I dealt with sciatic nerve pain for a very long time. Something called royal fern. Is that what it was? Yes, royal fern can be super helpful for sciatic nerve pain. Now, also going back to, the sign of Sagittarius rules something called the efferent nerves. Those are the nerves that take information from the spinal cord out to the muscles. Then Gemini, where the sun is, rules the afferent nerves. Those are the nerves that are taking information to the spinal cord. Then we've got that north node in the sign of Pisces. Pisces rules the parasympathetic nervous system, which is kind of like the calming part of the nervous system. But we've got the south node In Virgo, Virgo rules the sympathetic nervous system, which that's more like fight or flight mode. Okay, so all these guys making that grand square, nervous system could very much, especially if this is hitting something in your chart, nervous system could be a little overstimulated. Again, it depends on how it's hitting your chart. Might be actually calming if that North Node in Pisces is hitting something in your chart. But regardless, I will be taking very good care of my nervous system in the days surrounding this transit. And what I'm going to do that with, this right here is lemon balm. Now, lemon balm is, I mean, it's got to be one of my favorite. It's thought of as a weed. It's so funny. So many things that are thought of as weeds that people just yank out of their yards are super medicinal. Okay, lemon balm is one of them. It grows in abundance. It is a Jupiterian plant. All plants, and there could be shared rulership with a lot of plants. A lot of plants, it's not like just one, this is a very Jupiterian or under the rulership of Jupiter, but it can also share rulership with other celestial bodies. A lot of plants can. But when we think about, Jupiter being this influence of abundance and happiness and optimism and faith, that is the essence of lemon balm. It smells so good. You will know it's lemon balm. You got to be a little bit careful because it looks fairly similar to nettles. Like if you live in a place where you can go out and kind of harvest your own herbs and that sort of thing, looks kind of similar to lemon balm. I've had this happen with people before where they went to they thought it was lemon balm, but it was nettles and they got poked. But this lemon balm, you just kind of rub the leaf and it smells very much like lemon. It almost smells like a natural pine sol. I mean, I can't stand the smell of pine sol, if you know what I'm talking about, like the cleaning stuff. But it's like a cleaner, natural scent. And what I would be doing is making a lemon balm tea. Okay. I also make a lemon balm tincture. And I know some people have asked me about tinctures. You just look up you can watch YouTube videos all day on how to make tinctures. It's actually very, very easy to do, but tinctures are going to take at least 2 weeks to make. Lemon balm tea, I'm just going to take the fresh leaves, and I'm going to cut them up and I'm going to boil some water and then I'm going to put those in my little kettle and I'm going to pour the hot water onto them. I'm going to let it simmer or let them sit in hot water for about 10 minutes. And then drink that tea. That's my favorite. It's not only delicious, but it feels so good on the nervous system. It's very uplifting, but at the same time, calming for the nervous system. Okay, there's plenty of other things to take care of the nervous system. And, it's crazy, hyper overstimulated. Hops is a really, really good one. That's something, I'm not a doctor. I'm not offering any kind of medical advice, but that's what I will be indulging in. And you know what? Let me take this back. It is not royal fern. I knew it. I was questioning that. For sciatic nerve, it is not royal fern. It is blue vervain for sciatic nerve issues. That is one that helped me tremendously. Royal fern is great for a lot of other things too, but blue vervain, and you can get this stuff, in any herb shop. You can get it online. If you're going to buy herbs from anywhere, I highly recommend making sure that they are organic, because really, truly, if there's anything that we should be extra mindful about it being organic, it's herbs, because they're so sensitive to the pesticides and the herbicides and everything that, could be sprayed onto plants. So again, you could get everything online. I'm going to say that one more time. If you deal with sciatic nerve issues, blue vervain, you might want to give that a try. And I kind of recommend doing it in a tea rather than a tincture. There's some herbs I prefer in a tincture and some herbs I find they work better as a tea. Okay, so there's that. Now, gemstones, the dedicated zodiacal birthstone for the sign of Sagittarius is turquoise. So I put my turquoise on today. So turquoise is a great stone. It's super protective. When we think about, say movies or whatever, when you watch Native Americans, a lot of them wore turquoise and red coral together. The red coral was for going into battle. Okay, but turquoise was not only for protection, but also to be able to foresee. Okay, and the reason I'm pointing this out right here, this is a broken turquoise ring that I had forever, and I do think I'm going to try and get it fixed. I don't know where I would take this to get it fixed, but I think I'm going to. I remember reading this in books that turquoise was specific to, if you're wearing turquoise, something like a turquoise ring or, whatever it is, that something like if it breaks, it's because it's preventing something from on your body or in your body or even emotionally or mentally from breaking. Okay. And how this broke was I was wearing it and it was a complete accident, but a family member went to go shut the door. It was like a van, a heavy door, and my hand was there. And the ring stopped it from, cutting my finger. And so the ring broke, but my hand was perfectly okay. So that's my story with turquoise. I absolutely love turquoise, and it's a super Sagittarian stone. Okay, now the next thing I'm going to bring out here, these right here are called Herkimer Diamonds, which I've pulled out before. Herkimer Diamonds are not real diamonds, okay? But you can see they are super, super shiny. And the reason that they're called Herkimer Diamonds is because at least this is the story anyway, that there was a bunch of miners in New York that found a whole bunch. They thought they found diamonds because they're so sparkly. It was like a whole, if you can picture walking in and the cave is just completely shining and being how exciting that would be, thinking they're real diamonds, but they're not. It's some sort of a form of quartz. But Herkimer diamonds are incredible for enhancing intuition. I kid you not, I've had really wild times of meditating, holding on to 3 Herkimer diamonds in my left hand. If you're going to meditate with stones, if you want to take on the energy of the stone, you hold it in your non-dominant hand. If you're trying to release energy with the stone, you put it in your dominant hand. So I like to work in trios. Holding 3 Herkimer diamonds in my left hand and meditating, I have had some extremely wild intuitive things come through that completely came into fruition. So there's that. Lastly, I'm going to mention here, this right here is lapis. Lapis is a beautiful stone. It's another one that's super, super protective. I learned about lapis through the work of Edgar Cayce. It's a beautiful stone, super protective, great to wear as a pendant. And you know what? Actually, I will mention one more. Jupiter's stone, like in medical astrology, in traditional medical astrology, Jupiter's stone is yellow sapphire. So with that said, it's like yellow sapphire it resonates beautifully with the sign of Sagittarius. In fact, it's said that if you're a Sagittarius rising, the best stone for you to wear is a yellow sapphire. Yes, yellow sapphire is not exactly the most affordable stone. That's why I don't own one yet. But I know the right one. I want a yellow sapphire ring so bad, but I want the right one. So I've been manifesting that, and I just know the right one's going to come along someday. And then if you wanted to substitute that with something a little more affordable, citrine is kind of like a substitute for yellow sapphire. But with citrine, this is another thing. We're going to be a little bit careful because most citrine, like if you just go into a crystal shop and you're buying citrine, it's technically not actually citrine. It's amethyst that's been sort of like heat treated to turn it into a yellow color. And of course, that's way more affordable than real citrine. And so of course you could substitute that, yellow sapphire optimistic energy with citrine, like kind of fake citrine. But there's that. So that's what I'm going to be working with for this full moon. I think I will leave that there. If you would like to schedule your own natal chart analysis and astrology reading, we can go through your transits, your progressions, whatever you'd like to do. Please do schedule through Erin Wage, astrology.com. I do hope to hear from some of you. And until next time, namaste to all of you.